I'm Sarah Wilson and you're listening to the Roots and All podcast. I'm here to help you get growing. Join me as I explore everything plant related both indoors and out and provide the information you need to create your perfect green environment. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the podcast where I'm speaking to Jan Billington of Maddocks Farm Organics, a flower farm in Devon growing and selling organic edible flowers. We talk about the easiest and tastiest flowers you can grow, colour trends, some more unusual edible flowers, and how you can use edible flowers for your own special event. Jan starts by telling us about her farm.
Maddocks Farm Organics was set up nearly 17 years ago. I'd watched far too many episodes of Hugh Fernie Whittingstall back to sort of River Cottage and had this idea in my head that we could move and set up the good life. And to a certain extent, that's exactly what we did. But it wasn't exactly the easiest route. But what we do is we grow organic edible flowers and garnishes. As I say, we've been doing it for 17 years. The very first thing I did when we moved down here was to get licensed with the Soil Association. And we're still the only specialist edible flower growers that are certified organic. Which makes complete sense, but it is also a little bit bonkers because edible flowers are something that can't readily be washed and they certainly can't be peeled to remove any chemical residue like regular fruit and veg. So it makes entire sense to grow them organically. And they are also a luxury product. And in a world where, the environment is struggling and so many people are starving, if they are to justify their place in horticulture, then I think their production has to be involved in some way in putting more back than it takes out. So we're very keen environmentalists here, and obviously the whole process of growing flowers is something that attracts insects, and with the 75% decline in all flying insects over the last, I think it's since the early 70s, the statistics, which is absolutely horrific. So very much we were looking at, growing a product which is beautiful for people's plates, fabulous to eat, but is also giving back to the planet.
Yeah, as you say, I guess you don't want to eat flowers that have been sprayed in any way. The same as you wouldn't want to, well, I don't know. People do eat non-organic fruit and veg, and I guess it's the same theory. But as you say, with the flowers, is it the fact that it's just difficult to remove them?
Well, yeah. I mean, the issue, I think, is it's not so much that... I think I would disagree. I think using edible flowers that have been grown organically is crucial. The reason being is that even if varieties are edible, but they have been grown commercially, they are not intended to end up in the food chain. And there is no regulation, as there is with food, about what chemicals you can and cannot use in the production of flowers. And it's a hugely sad statistic that actually the florist industry is one of the worst for very intensive high glass house and imported flowers. So they are sprayed with herbicides and fungicides. Many of these have been proven to be carcinogenic. The flowers are picked, handled, packaged by a machine or farm workers. So they're not aimed to be a food product. They're obviously transported and stored in water and handled again. So food hygiene is not there at all. Whereas obviously with fruit and veg, which is washed, there is, that is grown non-organically, it still has to meet the regulations as to, what chemicals can and can't be used on it.
Yeah, that's a really important point. Thank you for mentioning that. Yeah. And you do actually go into, I think, some of the do's and don'ts of ordering edible flowers and using them. So obviously one of them is to make sure that you're getting them from somewhere which you know they're food grade. Are there any other things that people need to look out for?
Well, yes. I mean, certainly there are a lot of flowers out there that are poisonous. So do make sure that, if it's a little bit like mushrooms. Do make sure that, if you're picking your own or growing your own, or, that actually what you are picking and eating is edible. There are flowers that will put you in hospital, and there are flowers that will kill you. So, you really need to, make sure that if you're growing your own, that they are varieties that are edible. And there are variations between flower families as well. So, for example, pea flowers are edible. And some of those families of flowers are edible, but sweet peas, for example, are poisonous. So you absolutely don't want to be eating those. So a little bit to do your research is crucial. And that I think that's the main thing. And also to think, if you are foraging them, where you're picking them from. For example, if you're picking wild garlic in the spring, then you really need to make sure you're not picking it where people are walking their dogs for obvious reasons. And it's also sensible not to forage too close to main roads, because traffic does produce a sort of lead and things like that, which can impact on the properties of the flowers that are growing, alongside them. So just sensible things like that. Because, environmental health suggests that anything that you are going to be eating raw should be washed, which makes entire sense. However, the very structure of a lot of flowers means that they are very delicate. And if you wash them before using them, then you end up damaging the very integrity of the structure of the flower. Borage, for example, is incredibly delicate. And if you started washing your borage flowers, then they would soon disintegrate. So, yeah, just little things to sort of think about and bear in mind.
And I think you mentioned as well about pollen allergies, which, again, it's obvious really when you think about it, but maybe people aren't making the association between breathing in the pollen and actually eating it. So is there a link, if you're allergic to a certain type of pollen, does that mean you can't ingest it?
You know what? We've been doing this for 17 years now, and I've not come across anyone that's had an allergic reaction to flowers. And I'm sitting here, on my patio touching wood now. But I do think that, of course you have to be sensible. And if you have severe pollen allergies, then obviously flowers are covered in pollen. And there's all sorts, for example, fennel pollen is, is sold as a very expensive product for use because of the amazing aniseed flavour it does. But a lot of flowers are very pollen heavy, so it just is sensible. And the sort of the general advice is, if you're new to edible flowers, and you do have allergies, then just try some that are very, very low or no pollen, and just try a little bit and introduce them to your diet very, very carefully. And the other thing to think about, that there are obviously other allergies. For example, some people are allergic to mustards, and obviously, some of the mustard family have fabulous edible flowers with amazingly strong, spicy flavors. So again, you just need to be a little bit careful about these things.
Yeah, so presumably you can get some that are savoury and some that work better with the sweet dishes. It's a cornucopia, I guess, of flavours.
My absolute favourite are the savoury flowers, without a shadow of a doubt. But, for example, you're not going to put chives or wild garlic chives or anything that has a very strong flavour on a wedding cake. It's daft. For wedding cakes and things like that, you want something that looks beautiful, that will hold well, that's, preferably smells fabulous. But, then if you're making your tomato and mozzarella and salad, then there's nothing nicer than to have fresh chive blossoms sprinkled over the top, or, garlic chives, or basil flowers, or, some of the more savory ones. So they have their place both in, both in savory and sweet dishes. And, I'm all for encouraging chefs to experiment and, and try some of the more savory ones, rather than just plonking a flower on the side of a plate as a garnish without really thinking of why it's there.
And do they just work as a garnish, or could you actually use them in cooking or baking?
No, you can definitely use them. Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. There's some fabulous. There's a rose-scented geranium, which if you just use the leaves in the bottom of your baking tin, and then pour your cake batter on the top and cook it, the infusion that comes out of that will actually make the whole of your cake sponge smell and taste of roses. It's just fabulous. We work with a great chef called Ian Webber, who's up at the Farmer's Arms in Wolsey, and he makes the most fabulous lemon tart, and in it he puts sorrel, he puts begonias, he puts lemon thyme, he puts lemon verbena. So there's a whole layering of lemon flavours going through that, which, bear absolutely no relation to lemons at all. And, some of the sorrels and things and the begonias have got such a strong lemony, citrusy flavour. They're amazing in a gin as well as putting with fish and things like that. And obviously the herb flowers. Generally with flowers, if what they are producing as the flower is the sort of, the pinnacle of the plant, and they are about looking amazing and about smelling amazing, because what they're wanting to do is to attract pollinators. So in a lot of occasions, the flower is the most intense bit of the flavour of a particular herb. So, gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous rosemary flowers on lamb, or lavender flowers with lamb or duck. It's just amazing. We've done a lot of collaboration with other people on their books, and advised people on, and we've had a lot of people down here, working on their books down here. But we've never produced one ourselves. It's on our to-do list, but we haven't done it yet.
I think you definitely need to do a book. It sounds incredible. But are there any, really good books about cooking with flowers that you've worked on then?
Do you know what? I think there are some brilliant... The ones that are my favourite, and maybe I shouldn't say this, but the ones that are my favourite are... They all have different facets that are brilliant. Frances Bissell does an amazing... She's done 3 books now on edible flowers, and the recipes in them are second to none. But they're just hand illustrated rather beautifully, with little line drawings. And whilst they're very, very charming, I think today's market is far more visual, and particularly the next generation growing up, almost like infograms where you're talked through a process and a cooking, and it's much more online process and a visual process than a written process. So I don't think her books have had the recognition for the quality of the recipes that they should have perhaps deserved. Jekka McVicker has done a fabulous book on edible flowers, which very much concentrates on the growing side of it rather than necessarily, the in-depth recipes. But it's another beautiful book, and obviously, with her background as Chelsea gold medalist year after year after year, you can't get better advice on how to grow. So, it's very much horses for courses. There are some superb baking books that just look at the side of baking. Juliet Sear has just brought one out, but again, it's about that's just about cakes rather than looking at the wider picture. So and then of course there's the whole area of mixologists and cocktail makers, Lottie Muir has produced a lovely book on wild cocktails, which again has a big section on edible flowers, which is really interesting. So I think there's lots of edible flower books out there that cover, different parts, but not one that's sort of, the comprehensive Bible of pulling, everything you can possibly do with an edible flower together.
Yeah, well, there you go, gap in the market. So what are some of the easiest flowers that people could try at home? And what are some of the tastiest? That's probably a bit subjective, but if we were going for ease of growth and quite versatile to use in dishes, what would you recommend?
Oh, easy to grow. I mean, if you've got a tiny garden or maybe just a window box or something like that, then obviously the easiest ones would be some of the herb flowers, for example, chives, but also violas are lovely. Any of the little pansies, they do well in pots. Calendulas are fabulous. Their medicinal qualities and for making, brilliant suntan lotion, for preventing burns and things like that. They make fabulous salves, and they're great for you. So there's a lot of those sorts of things that can be. Nasturtiums as well do well in pots, and they've got that lovely peppery flavour. In terms of the garden, the ones I tend to love are the ones that attract the pollinators. We are very, very much aware of, the situation that our planet is in and our declining numbers of bees and pollinators. So it's, from my point of view, the ones that give me the greatest satisfaction are those that are just smothered in bees. The best for that is probably borage. And it's quite a nice one to grow because they're tiny little blue stars, and they don't keep well. I mean, we would always recommend people that if they're going to be using borage to buy them to arrive the day before they're being used. They don't have a long shelf life, but the little borage flowers refill with nectar I think it's something like about every 15 seconds. I might have got that wrong, but what it means is that because bees leave a scented footprint of when they've been to a flower, and they can obviously, when they go past a flower or land on a flower, they can tell when the last bee was there. But obviously with borage, the reason that the borage flowers and plants get so covered in bees is because those flowers are remaking nectar at such a fast rate. So in terms of, bees for your buck, borage is definitely the best one. And also all of the allium families, chives, garlic, obviously wild garlic in the spring, chives. We're now on to garlic chives here. But there seems to be a sort of almost an allium for every occasion, and they are loved, absolutely loved by wildlife. The garlic chives at this time of year, as we're heading into autumn, are particularly good because they've got so many antiseptic and medicinal properties that when the bees take that honey back into their hives, that is the honey, because obviously beekeepers will have taken any harvest that they're taking off their hives now. So that honey will stay in the hive over winter, and it will be keeping that antiseptic properties will be keeping the hive really healthy over winter. So it's another really nice one, nice one to grow for your pollinators.
It is easy to grow a lot of these flowers, and they're just kind of there at your back door, and you can use them. They don't cost you anything, and you know exactly where they've come from. So yeah, I guess it's a bit of a no-brainer.
Yeah, things like borage, they're annuals, but they self-seed everywhere, exactly the same as nasturtium. So once you've got them, you've got them. I think probably from a wildlife point of view, the most successful flowers we've done this year were just a 99p packet of single dahlias, and they have absolutely, because dahlias nowadays are getting bigger and more fancy and more elaborate, and they're lovely. They've got a really nice sort of chicory like flavour. So you wouldn't want to eat them with something sweet, But, in a salad with some goat's cheese or whatever, to have that walnuts, a little bit of drizzle of honey, to have that, it's almost like substituting a chicory. And yet, the double ones and the fancy ones that people grow, the bees can't get to the centre of them. Whereas this little, 99p packet of dahlia seed, I think we probably ended up getting about 50 plants. And yesterday I was looking at them and there were 3 different species of bee on them and 5 different species of butterfly on them, as well as hoverflies and everything else. And I'm just thinking, that 99p has probably done more for the environment. So it doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be fancy. It just requires a little bit of thinking about, so that you get some flowers early in the season. You get some flowers and that, flowers early in the season can be as simple as just not cutting your lawn and letting the daisies and the dandelions grow. And of course, again, I come back to just making sure you're harvesting these things from where there aren't dogs. But, daisies are lovely little edible flowers and a salad, and dandelions, again, fabulous for making vinegar and, dandelion wine my gran used to make and things like that. So, and again, those are feeding those bees when they first come out from hibernation, so are vitally important, and, food for free.
Yeah. Do people ever, get a bit scared of eating them? Do people kind of go, oh, that's a bit unusual, I'm not used to eating that, and are they a little bit tentative?
Yeah, I think so. I think probably less so now than they were when we started out. And I think, but I think nowadays people are aware of them. When we started out, I mean, we were very much selling direct to the public, and that's what we wanted to do, because they are delicate, they have a short shelf life. And what we were finding is that chefs were saying, well, I don't want to buy this because it arrives in my kitchen and it's dead within, 48 hours. So, and of course, that was because a lot of them were and still are being imported. They were then going to a wholesaler. They were then going to the wholesalers, to the chefs. And all of a sudden, it does become a very perishable product. So we decided that we were going to cut out the middleman and just sell directly to the public and directly to chefs and be very bespoke, and pick all of our flowers to order, to colour, and we still do that. So I think some of that fear has gone because chefs are using these products more. You see them a lot on television now. I still shout at the television when the wrong flowers are used in the wrong thing, but it's just like, but that's part of it, isn't it? I think, and we did work with a fabulous catering company that used to deliberately put edible flowers on the starters at weddings because they felt it was a brilliant icebreaker when you sit down at a wedding table and you don't necessarily know the other people on the table. If there were, unusual edible flowers on the plate, that people would then go, oh, what's this? And it and they were using it from that point of view, which was,
That's a good
I think
idea.
really innovative. Yeah, nice idea.
I can imagine people going to each other, are we supposed to eat this?
Yeah, exactly.
So talking of colours, actually, do they come in and go in trends? Are you noticing a trend for any particular colours at the moment?
Yeah, yes. Every year Pantone bring out their colour of the year. And sometimes I go, oh, because it's something like bronze or teal, and you just bang your head against a brick wall thinking, no, there are no flowers in teal. It's not a colour that exists in the floral world. This year it's living coral, which is dead coral, not pink coral, but living coral. And it's a lovely sort of peachy coral colour. But I find actually that there are obviously trends with weddings in the fact that people do like their blush, they like their white and cream and pale pinks. But increasingly people are becoming more individual and bolder and just thinking outside of the box. And I think sometimes people that incorporate edible flowers into their menu are kind of a little bit maybe more artistic and free thinking, and quite happy to do their own thing. And I did a brilliant one this weekend, which was all ochres and burnt orange, and another colour that popped up was burnt salmon. And I was thinking, I'm not sure even how to interpret burnt salmon, but it's fun, and it's that's what I love about the job, because you're working with people that have got a vision of what they want. Some people send swatches of fabric, or a picture of their the groom's tie, and it's about actually creating something that ties into their whole dream. And actually being part of someone's wedding day is a huge honour, and it's also a huge responsibility. And it's lovely because we've been doing it long enough now that we're actually starting to do generations of families, which is those ones that 10 years ago were getting married, and we've been doing christenings, we've been doing granny's 90th, and families come back, and and that's just fabulous, because you end up building a relationship with people. It's great. I love my job. It's fabulous.
Yeah, I can tell. It sounds it, and I'm jealous. I was going to finish by asking you, actually, what is the most unusual flower that you grow that people are really surprised to find out is edible?
Probably not so much surprised to find out is edible, but we grow a flower called the electric daisy, or buzz button, or toothache plant, and it's just weird. I mean, it's just so odd. It looks like a daisy without the petals, so it's a sort of, well, it is effectively a daisy without the petals. It's that yellow blob that you get in, that's my technical term there, that you get in the middle of a daisy, and if you chew one, it's very much like licking a battery. Your mouth starts to tingle. You then start to salivate, and your whole mouth goes numb, as though you've had an anaesthetic at the dentist, and then you just start to dribble a bit. It's absolutely bizarre, and they used to use it in medieval times for numbing toothache. But what mixologists have found, and I'm sure chefs will catch on to this, because at the moment most people just seem to use it as a form of torture for each other.
But Halloween parties.
Yeah, exactly. Or hen do's or stag do's or things like that. But actually, if you just use a tiny bit of it, what it does is, instead of just completely numbing your mouth, it heightens your taste buds and your awareness of flavors, and mixologists use it in cocktails to sort of almost do that whole yin and yang thing with layers of flavor, and it's really odd, and quite bizarre, but that's the one that you get the best reaction from. And begonias as well, with that really, really sharp citrus flavour, and people just aren't expecting it. And things like daylilies and tulips that have got a proper crunch to them, and they're slightly sweet, but it's basically like eating a slightly floral version of an iceberg lettuce. So they're not expecting that either. Broad bean flowers are fabulous. I love those. Those taste beanier than beans, if that makes sense at all. So it's every year I'm very fickle. As the season goes on, I go, oh, that's my favourite, and oh, that's my favourite. But the electric daisies are definitely the weirdest.
Yeah, I have eaten one of those actually, and it is very weird, I have to say. So do you run any courses?
We do one course each year, which is a fundraiser for the Bumblebee Conservation Trust. Where, as you know, we're passionate. We give 1% of our profits each year to various insect organisations. The Bumblebee Conservation Trust are fantastic, and they come here each year in the summer, and we do a course. We're open. You learn all about bumblebees. You learn about preservation of species. You learn about identifying all the different bumblebees, because although there's only 2 honeybee species in the country, there are something like, I think it's either 24 or 27 different species of bees, and a lot of bumblebees are actually more effective at pollinating than honeybees, and they are increasingly declining. So it's a great course. All of the proceeds go to Bumblebee Conservation Trust. We host the day, we provide all the food, it's lovely floral food, and we pay for all that. And then, as I say, the entire proceeds go to Bumblebee Conservation, and that is the only day at present that we're open.
Okay. And if people wanted to order flowers from you, how would they go about that?
I'm not an easy woman to get hold of by phone, in all honesty, because I have no phone reception in my office and no phone reception at the top of the field. So the easiest way to get in touch with me is by email. Having said that, we get over 100 email inquiries a day, so I'm not always, on top of replying. I know it's madness. However, what I have done is produce a really, really comprehensive website with the website shop, where you can go and look at the flowers by colour, by month, by occasion. So go do some looking and then come back to me and go, okay, right, I've looked on the website. I see you've got no availability for this particular flower at this type of, this time of year. What can I substitute that with? Or I love the wedding cake flowers, but my colours are this colour. What can you do in that colour? And we'll go from there. But a lot of people will just buy a box of, we have a request section. So, for example, they'll buy 3 boxes of flowers to decorate their wedding cake, and they will then, send me all of the information about the colours that they want, the style that they want, what they want it to look like, and we literally go out and pick every box to order. And and that's how we sort of, because we're a tiny firm. We're only on 3 acres of floral picking, and in winter there's only 2 of us here.
I was going to ask you that.
Yeah, and then in the summer we get up to 8 of us out there picking on a Thursday, because obviously that's the day when all of the flowers, the vast majority of the flowers for wedding cakes go out on a Thursday to arrive Friday, and then are popped onto the cakes on Saturday. Yeah, so we're a really tiny business compared to the big guys that are importing from all over the world, but we've made our niche by being by really concentrating on the quality and having that sort of bespoke service whereby you choose what you're getting.
As you'll know if you listen to my episode with Georgie Newbury of Common Farm Flowers, I'm full of admiration for businesses like Maddocks Farm Organics, which manage to produce quality products whilst maintaining their integrity and even managing to give some of their profits to charitable causes. I think it gives hope to all of us who aspire to run businesses that do well and do good. Thanks very much to Jan for talking to me. Please do check out her website at www.maddoxfarmorganics.co.uk, which, as she says, is very comprehensive and very much worth a browse if you'd like to find out more about buying, using and eating edible flowers. Thank you for listening, and a huge thank you especially to my new patrons who are supporting me on Patreon. Those on the $5 tier, apologies for my recent ranty bonus episode. I hope you can forgive me for the sounds of gin gulping. So that's it for this week. Have a great week, and I'll catch you next Tuesday. You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website www.rootsandall.co.uk, where you'll also find my blog and a sign-up form for the newsletter, which gives you a weekly roundup of content, plus the inside scoop on things like upcoming guests. Or you can subscribe wherever you normally get your podcasts. Email me with comments and feedback at podcast@rootsandall.co.uk. Follow me on Twitter, Roots and All, Facebook, Roots and All UK, and Instagram, Roots and All Pod. But please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support my work, because if you like what I do, please help me to continue doing it. Even if you make a one-off donation of £1, trust me, it all helps, and I will be immensely grateful. So please go to Patreon and search for Roots and All.